Welcome back to another episode of the Good Morning Minute podcast. I'm your host, Angelina Mojica, certified family life educator, life coach, and founder of Empower Her Steps. This season, we're entering a powerful new series called Rooted, Restoring the Fruit of the Spirit, a journey into identity, healing, and spiritual growth. In this season, we're not just talking about behavior or habits. No, friends, we're looking deeper into the roots of who we are, what shapes us, what wounded us, and how God restores identity one fruit at a time. Each episode features real conversations with real people who have experienced the pruning, the stretching, the storms, and the restoration of the fruit of the Spirit in their lives. So today I am honored and to welcome our special guest, and that's Rachel Gritt, a redeemed Jesus lover, multi-passionate ADHDer, trauma survivor, and mom of 3. She is the founder of the Abundant Life Collective, a movement helping women with chaotic, introdivergent brains seek, find, and actually live the abundant life Jesus offers. Rachel is also the host of the True Grit podcast. That's Jesus plus ADHD, where she blends faith, neuroscience, and practical no shame tools to help women break free from comparison, religious performance, and burnout. Her mission is to guide women into authentic, sustainable faith that works with the brain God gave them, not against it. Oh, Rachel, I'm so excited to get to know you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I love that you are blending faith with neuroscience. That is where I am in my season of life. And so I love it because I work with kids from traumatic backgrounds. I work with families. So I get it. I totally get it. So I'm excited. So why don't you just open us up with telling us a little bit about who you are and where you are in life right now?
Sure, absolutely. So I am hopefully at the tail end of a very long season of pruning right now. I am just coming up, I just surpassed 2 years of marriage with my wonderful husband, Cameron, who also has ADHD, in addition to brain cancer. So we've got some neurodivergence on multiple levels going on in our home. I've been genuinely following the Lord since about 2018. I grew up in the church, went to Christian school my entire life, but didn't really, excuse me, have a faith that was more substance than performance until about 2018. And so it really just has been many, many years now of just seeking the Lord with my whole heart, seeing where He wants to take me, having that be very different from the plan I had for myself, and just finding so much beauty even amongst the struggle along the way.
Wow. And just in your intro there, just introducing who you are and where you are in life, so much to unpack there. So I'm excited to get into our conversation. But I love that it gives us a beautiful starting point again to understand who you are today. So now let's go ahead and shift into our theme for this season, which is rooted, and talk about how the fruit of the Spirit has been shaping or maybe restoring your identity through all of this that you have disclosed. So I would like to just get started and ask you, um, when you think about the fruit of the Spirit, which fruit is most connected to your journey right now, and what part of your story makes that fruit so meaningful?
Oh, I feel like that's such a multifaceted question.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to choose just one, but I guess I would, if I have to narrow it down to just one, God is really walking me through peace right now,
Okay.
particularly what peace can and needs to look like, even when my circumstances look very different from how I imagined peace looking at this point in my life.
Hmm. Peace. And that's, I think for me, at one point, I didn't really understand like the true essence of peace, like what it truly means to be at peace with things until I totally surrendered to God in my journey, my healing journey, when I realized that I was trying to manage a situation with my daughter that I had never even dealt with in my own childhood.
Mm,
And so there was never peace amongst that. And until I was able to surrender and go, okay, I need to fix here first. It's always like the plane thing, right? Where you put the oxygen mask on. Until I was able to breathe for myself, then I was able to help my daughter breathe. And in that, peace started to evolve. And I didn't really understand until that moment. It was like this aha moment. Was it similar for you in that regard? Or, how did you discover this for yourself?
Honestly, I feel like this shift has really happened even in the last week. I am creating my own Advent study this year. I've always wanted to create an Advent study for years. Part of my like build up to Christmas has been like finding an Advent study, going through it with red and green pens, of course. And so this year is the first year I'm kind of fulfilling the dream of writing my own Advent study. And so I feel like God has very much been, giving me these questions and these passages. And so going through that study this week, God has really opened up, I think, some wounds that I haven't realized are unhealed quite yet, specifically relating to peace. He kind of led me down the path of Jeremiah 29:11, which, we all know, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And separating that from kind of the feel good anthem it's become and digging into the actual truth and really the uncomfortable reality of what that looks like has been just top of mind this week. So I really love the Bible Project. They do so much work with digging into the original text and the historical context and all of that. And so looking into Jeremiah 29:11, when we're looking at the Israelites who had just gotten home to the promised land, and then they're ripped again away from the land that had become such a big part of their identity and forced into exile. When Jeremiah is coming to them and going, hey guys, God has a plan for us. There is a path forward. It's going to take a while. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you are required to be faithful. We need to be faithful. Looking at how God has been so faithful in my life, even in seasons that really don't feel comfortable, which again is kind of where I'm still at right now. It just tugged on my heart in such a real and raw way that's just so timely for me right now. So it really has been this week that this, dig into peace has been happening.
I find that amazing when God starts to, as you start jumping into kind of a direction God is laying out for you, everything starts to fall in place and
Mhm.
everything that you're connecting to tends to make sense. I love that. I love that when I discover it too. So you're talking a little bit about pruning as he's bringing up some old wounds, right? What beliefs about yourself surfaced during this time, and how did God begin to rewrite them? Or how is he rewriting them as you're discovering them?
Absolutely. I tend to be, I'm a very anxious person. I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was 7. And so I've come to realize, and again, this is specifically this week, that when God grants me a yes, when God gives something to me, when he opens a door that I've been knocking at, my initial response is almost to question it, to go, okay, this is great, but where's the lesson? Where is this going to hurt? Because I know that the pruning season, it hurts, and I'm almost like bracing for impact,
Yeah.
which essentially is, looking the gift horse in the mouth, right? Going, okay, this is a great gift. Thanks, God, which is not only shortchanging him of the glory that I can provide him and
Mm.
that I can shine on him by fully, accepting and being so grateful for this gift. It also shortchanges my joy. And that clicked for me this morning. Actually, I was doing some journaling on that in particular and just realized, wow, I think that I have been robbing God of his glory, but also myself of the joy he wants to give me as his plan is unfolding and being realized right in front of my eyes.
Mm. So Rachel, I just want to slow down here because this is huge. If you're listening and you caught it, this is really huge because a lot of what we do in life is, and especially when we have the anxieties or we have those things that are just kind of hindering our brain from processing, being present and in the moment because you're always kind of worried about the next thing, right? Anxiety is that worry of what's to come or the fear of this could happen, whatnot. But you're what God is showing you in this moment and what he's unpacking for you is like take a breath and just realize, like, be present and in the moment. And that's something that we don't do when we have those things going on in our minds, is knowing how to be truly in the moment of celebration, the things you're discovering about yourself. And so I like how you've worded it here when you're talking about taking joy away from yourself to understand the milestones that you are achieving in this process, and God being able to slow you down just enough to say, no, let's sit here in this moment and celebrate, because you're discovering so much about yourself and it's changing the way you view yourself. And I think that's important. I really do. So I love that you're saying that.
Mhm.
Um, so this is a healing process, right? And when we talk about healing, how did healing, or your journey right now, the root begin to change the fruit? So as you're unraveling this thing for yourself, how is it changing your fruit?
I feel like, there's so many ways in which we can choose to put into practice the things that God is showing us. For me, that looks a lot like changing my thought life. I'm very intentional with my self-talk. That's something that my mom taught me from the time I was little. I'm very, very fortunate that that's something I've been, aware of and able to work on my entire life. So self-talk is an easy one for me, but my thought life about things other than myself, apart from the self-talk, is something that I definitely struggle with. And so even just the act of being more intentional with how I view a certain situation or how I view my present circumstances, I can feel that shift slowly happening. And it's helpful for me to kind of think about it almost as another form of self-talk, because it is how I'm talking about my view of my circumstances that then reflects back on me. And so right now the fruit's happening in my mind. It's happening by, taking every thought captive, right? And what does that actually mean? It's a fun platitude. It's something that we all say, we all know that quippy little saying, but actually doing it is completely different for me, honestly. And I do really well with word pictures. I love like fun, silly word pictures. So I'll like literally imagine myself with a little lasso, like, all right, we're gonna lasso this thought. We're gonna capture this one. We're reeling it in. And that's helpful for me, almost giving me something, obviously not literally tangible, but something kind of mentally tangible to go, okay, we're stopping this thought in its tracks. We're reeling it back in and we are redirecting. And so that's been a big shift that I'm working on right now.
I love that. And we are imaginative creatures. We tend to suppress that part of our humanity when we get older, whatnot, oh, let's operate in the real, like the reality. But your imagination can help you overcome so many things. And so I love how you're utilizing it here, where you're actually like, I've got the bad guy, I've lassoed him and we've
Yeah.
captured him and we're locking that away, we're changing that. So you're starting this thing through your minds, your self-talk. How have you seen it affect like your behavior and results, the relationships that you engage with?
Oh, I mean, our thoughts are so incredibly powerful. We see that in scripture. We see that in modern science, which I love when modern science catches up to what's in the Bible, like as a man thinketh, so is he, right? And so being able to take a thought that, our thoughts spiral, right? Being able to kind of stop that spiral in its tracks and not just pause the negative outcome that could happen from following that spiral, but turn it into something so positive. I love seeing that happen. Something that I've learned throughout my life is that when something turns you to God, when something drives you to your knees, the enemy's going to stop using it because it's a trigger to turn you to Christ. So even in the times where, changing my thoughts about something didn't really help my present circumstances, I've so found that being faithful with capturing and turning those thoughts to Christ and surrendering it to Him and, asking for wisdom on the situation, it not just improves the situation because you're turning to God, it also then the enemy tends to stop using that as a trigger because he knows it's going to drive you to your knees.
Mm. And that's so true. He really does. And I think we look at it too, when we really look at the enemy and his effort that he makes with Christians or just people that believe in God, are so like two times, three times more than he would someone that isn't practicing their faith or isn't practicing, their relationship with the Lord or investing in that, because there's effort that needs to be made to deter us from that. Oh, this is hard. And you hear that like, oh, this is hard. This, what, but it's also strengthening, when you know that I can be faithful. You mentioned, your faith. I can be faithful in knowing that it's all going to turn out for good anyways. So yes, this may be a season that we're struggling through and it's really hard and I'm wavering. It's okay. That's a natural response for sure, but understand at the end of it all, he's still going to be there. He's with you. He's with you through it. He's definitely going to be there to celebrate with you. You've so outlined in your story. Uh, and so he's there in the journey all the time. So once you start investing in that relationship and you start talking with him on a daily basis, and it's almost like, hey, I'm calling my best friend, I'm calling my mom or
Yeah.
whoever it is that you go to, here in life, he is that person spiritually, he is that person that you can tap into, and he's always there and he's always going to answer. And sometimes I guess the hardest part too is like the answers aren't always what you can imagine or predict.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to work through those things too. I don't know if you're finding that to be true for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like so often God's plan for our lives is completely and utterly different from what we would have. But when we stop kicking and struggling and going, but I wanted that thing, we're able to see how much deeper and richer what he has for us is than anything we could have come up with. In my I like to do a lot of listening prayer in my quiet time. And in my listening prayer today, God was kind of walking me through, like, look what I've brought you. Yeah, things are difficult, but look at some of the things that I have brought you. And this is a really silly example, but it's so concrete. So, right when I had my son, his dad and I split when he was 4 months old. We had bought this house that I loved, and the backyard of this house was my safe space. It was so beautiful. There were these trees that would get all crystallized in the winter. I loved that backyard so much. So when we split and the house that I had loved, I only got to live there for about 5 months before we split up. Even just losing that backyard was brutal. And that was just, adding insult to injury, right? And then I ended up getting my first apartment, and the backyard that was in this apartment was just beautiful. It very much was God going, hey, here, like, I've got something even better for you. And now my husband and I have been in our current house for a little over a year now, and we have just the most beautiful backyard. We've got a little shed back there with some chickens and some ducks and all of this. And it's such a silly example, but it's so concrete. I mourned the loss of my first backyard. And then I loved my second backyard. And I remember begging God, I just want one more summer in this backyard. Please just give me one more summer in this backyard. And he did not grant that request. And now looking at what he's done, even with something as silly as a backyard, is such a beautiful, literally beautiful picture of how he provides for us, even in the little things. I so thought I wanted that first house. I wanted to keep this family together. I wanted to make it work. I didn't want to leave. And where I am now in this process, and obviously there's so much more road to go, right? But where God has me in this process is so much more beautiful, even just the landscape wise, than what I thought I wanted to cling to.
Mm, I love that. And it also brings to mind for me the idea of how sometimes we want to hold on to the less than and don't realize that there is something far greater and better in the works, but we have to trust and we have to be faithful in stepping into that unknown by letting go and surrendering. Surrender is my word and
Mm,
theme for this season, but surrendering those things over because the replacement is always there. We just have to be willing to trust that he's going to deliver for sure. And so that's such a beautiful reminder for those that are listening and just for myself too, Rachel, that being faithful and understanding that if you just let go, you're making the space open and available for him to refill it. And you can't do that if you're constantly holding on. And that's where a lot of the turmoil starts to come up, and you start feeling all the feels, and the frustrations and things like that, because you aren't taking that step to just surrender and be like, okay, what's happening next, for sure. Um, so Rachel, is there any part of your story right now that you are just like have overcome, or maybe not even overcome, but you're still figuring it out? I know you mentioned your husband having both brain cancer and also having ADHD. How has that journey been for you? Because I know that can't be joyful, I mean, all the time.
Yeah, it's been, I hate to keep using the term difficult season, but it
Sure.
really,
Yeah.
it's been a lot. He had been a high performer at Google for almost 10 years. He loved his career. He was good at his career. And with the brain cancer came the loss of some of the abilities that allowed him to excel in the job that honestly had become a big part of his identity. And so, he was in the middle of treatment for the brain cancer when we met. And then less than 2 months into marriage, he was diagnosed with another form of cancer, completely unrelated, just out of the blue. Fortunately, that one was, a decently easy fix as far as cancer goes. It was a surgery, and then fortunately scans have been clear since then. But just how cancer has wrecked our journey and has impacted quite literally every facet of our lives, every single moment of every single day. uh, it's honestly a really good word picture for sin, you know. Um, but on a very practical level, it's been incredibly difficult. He ended up losing his job at Google through what I personally believe to be some very sketchy circumstances, but it has resulted in loss on so many levels. And so it's not something that will ever end. He will never go into remission. He'll be getting scans for the rest of his life, and it likely will come back at some point. It's just a matter of time. Praying that that is not the plan that God has for us. And scans, like I said, have been clear so far. But it is just a constant reminder. It very much is a thorn in the flesh. Quite literally, there is a chunk of brain matter missing in his head. Um, and like I said, it impacts every area of our lives, every single day. And so that has been, it's one of those things that you would never wish on anyone. And I can't speak to, his personal experience. I am not the one who has to go through the actual cancer journey, but I am there by his side. And watching the person you love with all of your heart go through something like this, it changes you quite a lot. And it's so incredibly heavy, but it is also such a reminder that this is not our home, that there will come a time where he will be made whole, where I will get to meet the version of him that, excelled at Google for 10 years and did all of these really cool things. I did not know him before his brain cancer, but someday I will get to meet that version of him. And so it is a constant reminder of both, our humanity. Pretty much before then, he very much felt invincible. Like he was on top of the world. He was, doing CrossFit and all of these things and was this high performer and really had built this incredible life for himself by the world's standards, only for all of that to come crashing down. And so it is such a good reminder of our humanity, but also of God's sovereignty. Because, like I said, no one would wish this situation on anyone, but it also is what led to one, him being refined into the man he is today. He is the most incredible person I have ever met. He loves the Lord with a fervor that I cannot put into words, but it also led to us finding each other and us being able to relate to the other's trauma and struggles in such an intensely connected way that has led to this beautiful marriage that I did not think marriages like mine were able to exist until I met my husband. And getting to know him and how he loves me and how he cares for me has made more concrete how Christ loves me. So I'm so much more able to understand Christ's love for me now because of my husband. And ultimately, all of that is rooted back in this cancer journey. And so it's so complex and multi-layered and beautiful and terrible. And it's such a huge part of our stories that you really just can't separate. So that was a lot of information there, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's been intense for sure.
Wow. And I mean, it's so inspiring because the hope that you have and just the understanding, the grace and the understanding that you have too. I mean, it's beautiful. And I mean, I can just imagine what the other side's going to look like once you and your husband are reunited for sure. Um, so for someone listening, Rachel, who may be struggling with the same fruit, struggling with peace, what truth about identity or healing would you want them to hear from you today?
I would say I love your word, surrender. That has been a big theme in my life to the point that I have not my will, but yours be done tattooed on my wrist to remind me. And something I've found to be incredibly powerful in my journey is verbal surrender. So not just, going through the theoretical process of surrendering something, but our words are so deeply powerful. And I would strongly encourage anyone listening using your voice to bring things into existence is so powerful. And God gave us our voice for a reason. And so, verbally surrendering, asking God out loud for wisdom to, take our will and mold it into His, that is a tool that has deepened my life, deepened my walk with the Lord more than I can even put into words. So, trust is a tricky thing. It's very easy to say that you trust someone. It's even very easy to think that you trust someone. But kind of connecting those pieces of, your thought process around certain situations, how you view your role versus God's role in a certain situation, how you speak about a certain situation, how you treat others involved in a certain situation, all of those things are so interconnected. And I have found that speaking to God about it, verbally putting things, out there and in His lap, pretty much with our words, is an incredibly powerful tool for taking us from that theoretical trust into real life trust. And then out of the heart, the mouth speaks. When we are operating out of a heart that is truly, seeking the Lord and choosing trust, because trust is not something that just happens. And it's really easy to go backwards very quickly when something goes wrong or even we start to doubt, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
It's so important to kind of bring that full circle and maintain it. And verbal surrender is a huge part of that process for me.
Mm. I just want to say, wow. I mean, what a powerful reminder that transformation doesn't begin with just behavior. It begins with the root and what you're talking
Mm.
about, mind, the just bringing it into words, like it all starts from inside. And so definitely the fruit grows slowly. It takes time, pruning, nurturing, and sometimes storms that reveal what God has been cultivating beneath the surface for sure. Before we close, Rachel, let's plant a final seed of encouragement for our listeners. If you could leave listeners with maybe a truth to help them become more rooted in God, in identity, and in the fruit of the Spirit, what would it be?
I would say changing our definition of what good is and matching it to God's is crucial. We can tend to make scripture say whatever we want it to say, but being willing to lay down our view of God's promises and our view of what Him working things together for good should look like, and instead go, okay, God, whatever good looks like for me in your eyes, that is what I want. When I started working on that for myself, my entire life, my entire faith, everything about me as a person changed drastically and for the better. Things are very difficult even now. The season of refinement is still ongoing, but I can honestly say I would not change anything. The family that God has given me, the circumstances that God has given me, there is so much purpose even in the painful parts. And so really just taking that by the horns and going, okay, God, I'm handing this to you. I don't want control. I want you to have your vision for my life realized. I want your good, not my own. That was really the start of everything changing for me.
I love that. And that's so empowering because if you can do that for yourself and go, you know what, it doesn't matter what my friend's doing over here or this person over here is doing, like you lose all comparison, right? It's about me and it's about what he convicts in me to make me the person he knows I can be. So I love that. I do. And before we wrap up, Rachel, where can listeners connect with you? Let's say they are enjoying this conversation, but they want to get to know you, maybe connect to your podcast. Um, any upcoming projects? Help us understand where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is over on my website, rachelgrit.com. There are links to my podcast. I'm very active on TikTok. Right now, the Advent study that I'm doing is on TikTok. Oh, are you able to edit that part out? I guess Advent's going to be over after, before the podcast episode is released.
No, but they can still catch it, right? On replay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep. So I'm very active on TikTok. I do bite-sized Bible casts almost every day on TikTok where we just go through a little bit of scripture so that it's short and accessible, low effort, high impact is very much my thing. But all of that can be found on my website, rachelgrit.com.
Wonderful. Well, Rachel, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your heart, your story, your healing, and the fruit that God is growing in your life. Your story reminds us that fruit of the Spirit isn't about perfection, it's about restoration. It's about allowing God to heal the roots so new fruit can grow. So, to our listeners, as you reflect on today's conversation, ask yourself, which fruit is God restoring in me right now? And what root is He gently trying to heal? I want you to remember growth takes time, but every seed planted in faith will produce fruit in due season. So friends, stay rooted, stay real, and stay growing. Until next time, I'm Angelina Mojica, your life coach, sending you much love, much peace, many blessings.